introduce a gentleman to you. His name is Andy McQuin. He's got a very intriguing title. It's called The Power of Brand Advertising, the Impotence of Political Advertising, which I think is very interesting to hear about. Andy and I have known each other for a few years, too many years, in my opinion. But no, we've known each other for quite a number of years, and we have a love of sport. We used to play cricket together, and one thing which I remember incredibly well was that this dashing, wonderful batsman went on and scored a century, and I was with him at the other end in a partnership of 105, and I handed in broken double figures by the time he got his century. We put on 105, and it was absolutely wonderful. Dashing, impatient, and just smacking the ball out of the ground was Andy. One of the other things which I remember about Andy was that he's also a wonderful Man City fan. So he should be in an incredibly good mood today after what happened yesterday evening. And I'm sorry about the Liverpool fans who might be here. Laugh up my sleeve about it. But absolutely delighted that Andy will be in a good mood, and I hope and I'm sure he'll give you a wonderful talk. I'm going to hand you over to my friend, someone I admire a great deal, and I'm sure he will give you a very entertaining half hour or so. Andy McQuin.
Thanks, David. And do I share the screen, or are you doing it remotely for me?
You share the screen.
Okay.
I've set it up so you can share it.
Okay, thank you. So there we go. Is that good for everybody? Can everyone see hello?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Dave, and thanks for the invitation. A little bit more about me. I did meet Dave 55 years ago. He said it was a long time. It's an effing long time ago. 55 years ago. We've not only played sports together, but we've gotten drunk together. I think we've chatted women up together, haven't we? Not very successfully. We've gone to sporting events. We've gone on holiday together. And so if anybody needs to know any dirt about Dave, I'm the guy to come to. And I know plenty. After school with Dave, I went to Sussex University, got an economics degree, and then moved into marketing with Cadbury, Gillette, and TM Lewin. Then moved into the advertising world with agencies like Ogilvy and Mather, TBWA, and Lintess. And I worked with many multinational companies like Unilever, GlaxoSmithKline, Apple, Adidas, to name a few. And I also worked in London, Glasgow, Johannesburg, Hong Kong, Amsterdam, and Budapest. Now, I'm going to talk at the end of this presentation about how political parties might do advertising better, but I'm not a creative person. I was a manager of agencies and a strategist. So it's not the words and pictures that I'm going to talk about, it's the thinking. But hopefully it'll be just as interesting. The title is The Power of Advertising, and I've done a presentation like that on many, many occasions, but I thought I'd try and bring it home to your interest. So I've compared that. I'd like to compare it with the impotence of political advertising. The way I want to run with it tonight is I want to talk about the difference between advertising and communication, some principles for successful brand advertising, some examples of some good brand advertising, a brief look at political advertising. Does it work? If not, why not? And then my idea for how political advertising can improve. Now, I've got some visuals of attendees covering some of the slides. Is it possible to get rid of them, Anne, or not?
Sorry, what do you want to do?
Get rid of the thumbnail visuals of the attendees.
If you hover over it to the top, you will see there are different sizes to it, and if you make the single thumbnail on the very left,
perfect, done it.
You should just have one, and then you can move that to wherever's the best place for you.
Okay, I shall just leave it.
Okay.
Okay, so a caveat to everything I've just said. I've never worked on a political campaign. I don't really have political affiliations, certainly not to any particular party, although I think I am an interested person when it comes to politics in general. So I'm kind of wearing L plates in terms of political advertising. So I'm relying on my experience in other categories of advertising. I'm also hoping that you're able to see the parallels that I might draw and apply them to politics. If not, we're all going to be a bit up in the air. So the crux of the matter, advertising and communication. This is my contention. All advertising is communication, but not all communication is advertising. And I say that because advertising aims to cause people to think, feel, or do something different. We develop an objective, we develop strategies for it, and then executions to make people do some specific actions differently. Whereas communication aims at conveying some information. So, you know, Barclays Bank might say, I want to announce my results for the year. They communicate it. That's information. People might do something according to it, but there was no strategy, there was no intention in that. Advertising, however, aims to cause people to think, feel, or do something differently. And my contention is that political parties engage in lots and lots of communication, but not very much of the sophisticated techniques of advertising. There are, however, some exceptions. So here are 10 very, very broad principles of advertising. And I want to run through them incredibly quickly. Luckily, they are principles, unlike scientific principles, because they evolve over time. The first of them is that each advertising campaign, each individual ad should focus on one single-minded message. Viewers are not there to look at, listen to, see advertising. They're online to get some content. They're looking at TV to see a program. Advertising has to interrupt. So you've not got much time to get them. If you try and send them 2, 3, 4, or 5 messages, you'll get nothing across. So a single-minded message is a key principle and has been forever. The second is that we should be sending them the benefit of the product, the brand, and not a feature. I mean, going back to the 50s and the 60s, housewives didn't want the blue dots, the blue specks in washing powder. They wanted whiter washing, better smelling washing, or whatever. The blue specks may well have been a justification for whitewashing, but what she really wanted was her washing to be whiter. So we need to give them better benefits and not features. The third principle is that, I need to move this now, hold on. Benefits can be emotional as well as rational. I'm sure everyone's heard of the phrase unique selling proposition. And a unique selling proposition used to be a functional, rational ingredient or benefit. More and more today, emotional benefits are more powerful than rational benefits. A brand bestows an emotional image benefit onto its users and its consumers. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go on. The fourth principle is that benefits used to be driven largely by copy. So the print advertising would say, surf washes whiter. More and more, however, we are realizing that the brain is actually better geared to receiving messages visually. The brain can actually process visuals, something like 60,000 times faster than it can process copy or words. 80% of what is communicated by visuals, and people remember 6 times more what they see than what they read. So more and more advertising is going for image, visual-based rather than copy-based. Fifth principle, it needs to aim at a specific segment of the target market. It's no use talking to vegans about a pork chop. You know, they are not in the target market. It's also no use talking to people whose attitudes about ecology prevent them from buying an internal combustion engine. So you need to choose your segment particularly tightly. Sixthly, we use a creative concept, sometimes called a big idea, to get the benefit across. And that's simply because people remember creative ideas more than a straightforward benefit. And this creative concept can be anything from a visual, a slogan, a tune. It is something which makes the benefit more memorable, as simple as that. Seventhly, it creates an impact and generates interest. We are bombarded with advertising. Depending on where you read, it's between 5,000 and 10,000 different ads every single day that we can be hit with. Given that, you've really got to do something different, something impactful to get the interest. The next point is a similar point, and that is in execution. It has to be different and distinctive. Your product nowadays is more likely to be parity than any other time. So therefore, your advertising actually becomes a point of difference. So it really needs to be distinctively different to actually cut through. Ninth point would be that likability is important. It used to be that likability was absolutely irrelevant. But now we find that people buy more brands which they like than people that they don't like. They attribute human characteristics to brand. So to make your advertising likable is actually a very powerful tool. And the final thing is it needs to have something memorable, because you might see the ad on a Monday and you might not go through the purchasing cycle for another month. If you've not remembered the brand, if you've not remembered the benefit, you're unlikely to be affected by that advertising. So very quickly, very broadly, 10 basic principles of good advertising. And now some examples. I'm starting off with some old ads to show you how we've moved through a few decades away from copy-based advertising into some more visual, impactful advertising. So here is an ad from the 1950s from Cadillac. This was deemed to be the most amazingly creative ad of its day, because it didn't talk just about the car, it talked about the attitude that Cadillac had. They were the brand leader, and there were responsibilities. There were responsibilities to individuals, there were responsibilities to their workers, there were responsibilities to the environment. And it was a long, long copy ad. And that would have been read in the 1950s because there was lack of competition for advertising, and it became part of the reading of consumers. Moving on another 10 years or so, here's a long copy ad and an interesting approach. This was when sugar was being criticized for being bad for you. And so Krispy Kremes tackled it head on in this long copy ad. And they said, you know, yes, donuts are bad for you, but so is not drinking enough water, so is too much TV, so is stress, and so on. There are lots of bad things for you, but actually Krispy Kremes taste really good. That was a great ad in the 1960s. In the 1970s, the anti-slavery campaigning body released this ad, and they realized that advertising with long copy was getting less and less attention. So they had to have more and more impact of with the headline. So they launched this ad which said, "Read this, you piece of shit." And of course, that piece of shit was the way that those who were either running slaves or who were using slaves would be talking to slaves of the day. So that type of advertising has changed almost completely. There is still one or two long copy ads, but they're very, very few and far between. We're more likely to see advertising like this. And this is a relaunch of the iPod. It's about 10 years old, but it was when people were still talking about the technology of the iPods or of that category. They were still talking about the speed of downloads and the capacity. And Apple said, you know what, the benefit of this is you can take your music out and you can enjoy it anywhere. And they developed this campaign, which was not only pretty revolutionary, but it was very, very cool. And it made people want to buy an Apple iPod because it was a cool accessory. An ad which I still think, this is probably 5 or 6 years old, I still think that this is an amazing piece of thinking. How do you get across the refreshment value of a Coca-Cola in a print ad? Can you read what it says there? Try not to hear this. Whenever I see this, I absolutely hear the shh, and I can sense the sparkling bubbles popping up, and it makes me want a Coca-Cola. I think that's a fantastic piece of graphic communication. A little bit of cheeky humor here. Again, if you can read the bottom, this is for Durex Extra Large. So taking a little bit of exaggeration to get across its message. Diesel has done a campaign now for 5 or 6 years talking about being rebellious. And this is the latest in the campaign, where they've moved on from being just rebellious to actually saying, you know, yeah, we all do some stupid things, but it's actually quite fun, isn't it, doing stupid things? And again, this is talking to the user about why they are proud to wear diesel. Good old classic campaign technique, before and after, adapting it for Weight Watchers, wide door to go in, slim door to come out. Another Apple campaign here, where they've got an iRun program, which allows them to make sure all their music is shuffled to the run that they do. But it's just superbly symbolic of what happens on a run. You start at one point, you go through the park, and you want music all the way. And this just symbolizes that perfectly for me. A nice ad here for a French opticians. Looking through the opticians, it's the only one that can actually bring a Van Gogh into focus. Beautiful demonstration, even though it is totally hyperbolic. But they're all communicating instantly. They're all communicating powerfully and fairly aggressively in many cases. Next one, a bit of misdirection, because this is a cream for cracked heels. And the visual there is simply a pair of cracked heels. You know, it can't have much more of a boring product than a cream for cracked heels. So those are some of the types of print ads which I think have been particularly powerful. In fact, I know a lot of them have been incredibly successful. I want to move on to 2 or 3 TV commercials now with different techniques in them. This is John Lewis. It's had a series of Christmas ads for 10 years now. And before John Lewis came with this type of approach, your Christmas ad used to have 50 products on a sheet of paper. It was in the newspaper, sorry. It would have a price, and it would say, hurry, delivery before Christmas available. Now, Christmas advertising is totally changed. All the major supermarkets, all the major department stores have advertising based on emotion. And these have been incredibly successful.
I would like to leave this city. This old town don't smell too pretty, and I can feel the warning signs running around my mind. And when I leave this planet, you know I'd stay, but I just can't stand it. And I can feel the warning signs running around my mind. So here I go, I'm still scratching around in the same old hole. My body feels young, but my mind is very old. So what do you say? You can't give me the dreams that are mine anyway. You're half the world away. You're half the world away. I've been lost, I've been found, but I don't feel down. You're half the world away. I've been lost, I've been found, but I don't feel down. I don't feel down.
So that was not only a successful ad in terms of likability and emotional delivery, but it was incredibly successful in terms of sales results. I think that was in 2014, that ad, from a series of 10. They exceeded sales targets by nearly 10% over Christmas, which is a phenomenal result for a store in such a competitive category. So the next example shows you how humor can be used to convey a pretty rational message. And this is all about the power of a new launch of a Toyota Hilux. So the Toyota Hilux is still the biggest selling truck in Australia. This is a technique which is used more and more and more, and that is a user image. The advertising talks about values which it will bestow on the user, and people will buy the product or the brand because they like the image that it bestows on them. This is an Apple campaign, which again is a good few years ago, but still runs today, and still the brand is still benefiting from the user image which this launch campaign bestowed.
Here's to the crazy ones, the rebels, the troublemakers, the ones who see things differently. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
The next and the final example is something called a brand purpose. More and more brands have noticed that consumers are taking interest in what the brand and the company that runs the brand does in a broader perspective. What do they do on ecology? What do they do on human rights? What do they do on employment regulations and so on? Dove is an old soap. It's a 50, 60, 70-year-old soap. About 5-10 years ago, they launched a brand purpose, which was all about trying to support women's self-esteem. And they launched with this campaign. And it's run for, as I say, 5 or 10 years now, with lots of programs which practically help women improve their self-image and their self-worth. It is, for me, one of the most emotional ads or campaigns I've ever seen. It goes on for a couple of minutes, but it's well worth a look. Oh, hold on. There we go.
I'm a forensic artist, worked for the San Jose Police Department from 1995.
I showed up to a place I'd never been, and there was a guy with a drafting board.
We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us.
Tell me about your hair.
I didn't know what he was doing, but then I could tell after several questions that he was drawing me.
Tell me about your chin.
It kind of protrudes a little bit, especially when I smile.
Your jaw.
My mom told me I had a big jaw.
What would be your most prominent feature?
Kind of have a fat, rounder face.
The older I've gotten, the more freckles I've gotten.
I would say I have a pretty big forehead.
Once I get a sketch, I say thank you very much, and then they leave. I don't see them.
All I had been told before the sketch was to get friendly with this other woman, Chloe.
Today I'm going to ask you some questions about a person you met earlier, and I'm going to ask you some general questions about their face.
She was thin, so you could see her cheekbones. And her chin, it was a nice, thin chin.
She had nice eyes. They lit up when she spoke.
Cute nose.
She had blue eyes, very nice blue eyes.
So here we are. This is the sketch that you helped me create, and that's a sketch that somebody described over here.
So yeah, that's... She looks closed off and fatter, sadder too. The second one looks more open, friendly, and happy. I should be more grateful of my natural beauty. It impacts the choices and the friends that we make, the jobs we apply for, how we treat our children. It impacts everything. Couldn't be more critical to your happiness.
Do you think you're more beautiful than you say?
Yeah. Yeah. We spend a lot of time as women analyzing and trying to fix the things that aren't quite right. And we should spend more time appreciating the things that we do like.
Okay, I've seen that more than 100 times and it still gets me upset. Okay, so in summary, the best ads today are all these. They are visually based, they're likable, they have brand purpose. Some of them, they're different, they're charming, they're challenging, they're values based, image driven and impactful. What they're not is rational. They're not word heavy. They're not analytical, fact oriented, logic based. They don't demand concentration. They're not comparative, even comparison websites. So after having said that, I saw this ad and thinking, you know, this is a good example of how political advertising is not top in class, best in class. I mean, this is very heavy copy based. The visual actually doesn't communicate anything particularly. The logo, the slogan, the payoff here for the many, not the few, is actually not a bad payoff line in my view. But it doesn't do anything in terms of the principles which I think make for good advertising. Whilst we're talking about slogans, let's just talk very quickly. The Americans are always big on slogans. I only put this in because President Trump, who is my bête noire when it comes to politicians, I absolutely despise everything that he's done. He can't even get his own slogan. He copied the Make America Great Again from the Reagan campaign of the 1980s. A slogan which I do think worked incredibly well is the Yes We Can campaign slogan by Obama, because it talks to many, many factions within society. It talked to blacks who believe they're being unjustly treated. It talked to white blue-collar workers who believed things were moving against them. It talked to women who were underrepresented in wherever you look. So it was an amazingly inclusive, albeit segmented appeal. It was also incredibly optimistic. And it became part of, I talked about, you know, the campaigns having sort of likability. It was incredibly well liked. In fact, it was made into a pop video by will.i.am and about 25 other actors, actresses, and singers. And it won an Emmy. I'm going to play just the first 10 seconds, 15 seconds of it, because it is quite interesting how a slogan can get popularity.
Was a creep opinions, declare the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It was sung by immigrants. They struck out this shore, pioneers, pushed west.
That goes on for a little too long to see it all. But the words were from Obama's speech, concession speech in the New Hampshire primary in his first election run. So I thought we'd look very quickly at some UK election slogans and see how they match up to that. Conservatives talked about unleash Britain's potential. Britain deserves better. Lib Dems, it's time for a real change. Labour, forward together, strong and stable. For the many, not the few. Change Britain's future. None of them is really talking to me as an individual would talk. They're far too high-handed. They don't actually mean anything. As I say, for the many, not the few is probably the best of those. But even so, I think that that could get down and dirty even better and convey something which actually would mean something to most of the voters. Now, having said, I don't think much of the advertising is good. Some of it has actually been famously good. And in talking to Dave and talking to a few people locally here about what I was going to do, I asked them if they could remember any good political advertising. And the first one that almost everyone mentions is Labour isn't working. It's short and sharp. It has a visual which talks about the pain of the unemployment line, and that is a great piece of advertising. Another instantly communicating ad is Labour's policy on arms. I'm sorry that this is all anti-Labour, but that's just the way they seem to run. I think this is probably, in my view, the best of the three that we've just seen. Labour's tax bombshell. A bit more copy on this one, but the visual is so arresting. Beliar or Blier, or however you pronounce that. Most, however, are pretty bland. The language used is just not motivating. Don't just hope for a better life, vote for one. We can't go on like this. I'll cut the deficit, not the NHS. The fuck off back to Eton, by the way, was not in the original ad. And Labour government works, vote Labour. Really, it's just not making people want to do something different, in my view. This is I think of the last election. Just looking at it, you don't need to read them to realise that they're not actually going to hit home in the same way that some of those others have. They're mostly long copy. Any visual seems to just have Boris on it or a politician of the other party. Some specific ads from the Labour Party, which I think were run online in social media more than anywhere else. But again, incredibly hard work. That's the word. They're all hard work. So how successful are they? It's quite hard to find research results, but I just put a couple of quotes here from research from the last 10 years or so, where people say, the conclusion of some of the research companies, ads have small effects and decay quickly, i.e. they've got no memorability, which is pretty poor if you consider that a campaign might run for 6 to 8 weeks. And people might only see the advertising in the first couple of weeks, yet they're expected to vote 4 or 5 weeks later. You need something which doesn't decay, with something which is memorable. On average, the advertisements move target candidates' favourability by less than 1 point, so less than 0.1 of a point on a scale of 1 to 5. And then finally, the effect on target candidate vote choice is also small at 0.7 percentage points, but not statistically significant. So it doesn't seem that much is being achieved by the campaigns. The question is, how can political party ads get better? And this is my one subjective view, only my view, nobody else's. I think there is room for a party to do a Dove. By that I mean Dove, as I said before, it's just a soap. But Dove's bigger purpose is to support the self-esteem of women. Dove makes women feel valued. Women respond to Dove's position on self-worth by buying the brand. And the sales over the last 5 to 10 years have grown phenomenally. Their point of difference, their positioning is that Dove helps to raise women's self-esteem and thereby enables them to realize their full potential. How do we translate this to politics? Well, I think that a party could agree what a bigger picture or a bigger purpose was for them. So Dove chose women's self-esteem. A political party can choose a bigger picture, a universal human value. It could communicate this in every single ad it did, every single speech. The policies, the details of the policies are then only there to act as proof of the party's belief in this value. And I'll give you a bit of an example in the next slide. I'm not here to say what that value might be. I'm not advocating a specific purpose. What I'm saying is such an approach could provide the basis of a more successful campaign. And it came back to me when I read this quote yesterday. People forget what you say to them. They'll even forget what you do, but they'll remember how you make them feel. And giving a true, bigger picture purpose about your party can really do that. So here's an example. Let us say that Labour said to itself, we're going to be the party that stands for fairness, okay? I mean, I think Labour probably already is in many minds. But what that would mean is that you have to fight for fairness everywhere and in everything it does. It's driven by the need to be fair. You could then have two types of campaign. The first type is what I call a broad image campaign, solely devoted to conveying fairness. And you have a fairness charter, you have fairness advertising, you have fairness communication. And I'm going to show you a clip of an ad after this, which talks about Biden returning decency. So his bigger issue, it's not that big an issue to be honest, but his bigger position is decency. Then the second level of campaign would be where your ads communicate the specific policies, but which also reinforce fairness. The policies then support the claim of fairness. For example, your headline, and this is where I claim that I'm not a copywriter, but your headline could be, pay no taxes on the first 25,000. That's the fair thing to do. Make schooling fair for all, guaranteeing a fair share of NHS for all. So the policies about the NHS, about schooling and about taxation are all tied together with your overarching theme of being the party that's fair to everybody. What this also does is it unearths the positive user image because it says to voters, are you a fair person? Labour voters are fair-minded and it makes people feel good about voting Labour. How can you, if somebody said to you, are you fair? Well, of course I am. Well, then you're halfway towards being a Labour voter. As I said there, I don't actually need to know all the policies. If I know they're fair, then that's okay with me. So here's the ad for Biden's decency. At the front, you see a couple of clips from the last 3 or 4 presidents being decent. You then see Trump being the arse that he is, and then you'll see the spiel for Biden and decency.
We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them. As they've slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
Those who are lost now, their legacy must be our lives. I can hear you, and the people who do these things will hear all of us soon. I am dispatching thousands and thousands of heavily armed soldiers. We dominate the streets. I won't traffic in fear and division. I won't fan the flames of hate. It's time to pick up our heads. Remember who we are. This is the United States of America.
Okay, the analogy is not perfect, but it, I think, demonstrates what I was talking about. And finally, it needs a good slogan, it needs a good payoff line. And I think here you could afford to be a lot more colloquial. Instead of something which is a little bit highfalutin, you could, Labour, fair for all. Labour, fair play for all. Labour, now that's what I call fair. Labour, simply fair, and so on. You know, there are lots of ways that it can be said. And in fact, you could use these differently in different pieces of communication. But there is an overarching human value which a party, in this case Labour, could own. And of course, there is a huge price to be paid for not being fair. And this is just a funny way of ending, talking about what happens if you're not fair.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay, it is indeed the Wall Street protest. That's it. I hope it was interesting. David, I hope it fulfilled the brief. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Andy. Would you like to turn off your PowerPoint?
Of course I would if I could find out how. There we go.
Jolly good, jolly good. I always said that you were a bright dude, because the talk was incredibly illuminating. I think is the word. It's very sad that you actually used the Labour adverts, which were crap. It's really sad about that, but it makes you wonder after listening to what you said. But before we ask questions about from anyone, I've got a question very quickly. Did the Conservatives win the last election because they had a 3-word slogan, "Get Brexit done"?
That's impossible to answer, Dave. But I think it was a, I think the Brexit issue and "Get Brexit done" was incredibly powerful. I do believe that. I don't know whether they won it because of that, but it certainly helped. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. If anybody's got a question for Andy, could they raise their, well, we'll have the left hand this time because we were all on the left, aren't we? Yes, Mr. Featherstone, Everton fan and Chester regular.
Chester fan, excuse me. I would be an Evertonian, but I'm a Chester fan. I thought a couple of the most effective political slogans you put up were the actual negative ones for the Conservatives. Labour isn't working. Labour's defence policy. What are your thoughts on negative policy, negative advertising?
It's a really good question and a big issue. I read a little bit in preparing for this, and quite a lot of people believe that negative campaigns are generally speaking more successful than positive campaigns. I personally believe that what they might do is help the unconvinced move over. So I mean, I guess that's the soft underbelly, isn't it? You know, so if you've got somebody who is wavering between the two, a negative campaign could well switch them to the party that's putting those ads forward. But I've not seen any definitive negative is more successful than positive. There is a sense that they could well work with the undecideds.
Thanks, Andy. We got a question, and I want to take these in order. We'll have Matthew first, then Andy, and then Ray. So, Matthew.
My question was going to be: have you looked into ads that are deliberately badly made? I remember from the last election, the Conservatives on Twitter at least ran ads that was just plain white background, black text of Comic Sans with "we need to get with MPs need to pass a Brexit deal," and that's all it said. Right. But because of how badly it was made, it was like mocked, but was easily, cheaply spread. I was wondering how much of an effect you think ads like that work.
It's again very hard to say. I mean, the principles that I outlined, I think, would still apply. If that badly made ad was still single-minded, if it had something in it which was impactful and memorable, then it would be fine. You know, you don't need to spend £1 million budget on a TV ad to make a good TV ad. Whether or not there's something in the psyche of the viewer which says, this is badly made, and therefore they're not spending money on production, therefore I like it better, I don't really know. There might be. But I would just go back to those principles. If it's communicating, if it's got impact, and if it's got single-minded message, you know, that's the important thing.
Right, I want to move on to, you're still a Liverpool fan, aren't you, Andy?
Yes, indeed. Well, we've got to give you some sort of joy, David, you know. I can't dominate for 3 years. But anyway, just on the advertising, I'm interested to see what you think about subliminal advertising. I know it's been banned. Well, I believe it's been banned. But if it's being used and not telling you, is there a way when you're watching an advert that you can actually spot there's a subliminal message in it? And is it banned? And you know,
it is. It's not legal. And it is, the word subliminal means that human beings can't actually notice it's there. And, you know, the major TV stations, you know, they will check for it. I don't know how videos that go onto social media, whether they do or whether they can check for it. I don't know that. I mean, I think I was thinking about talking about advertising or content in social media, but it's such a big topic right now, and there are so many contentious issues which nobody has really got to grips with. I thought that would take over an hour and we wouldn't get very far. So in social media aside, I know that, you know, the major networks will certainly not allow it, and they will check for it.
Ray, thanks, Andy.
Yeah, I suppose I was just going to say, it seems that almost every rule that you put forward is one that can be ignored, and in the sense that, you know, all the things that you say might deliver a result, you know, at some point the advertisers will turn that on their head, you know, so they'll do one of these intriguing adverts that don't even mention what the product is. So there won't be anything focused or short message. It will go on for ages, and you'll be thinking, "What the bloody hell was that about?" So advertisers seem to debunk all their own rules, and I think the thing about political advertising is it's not in a vacuum. It's not just us putting our message. There's someone out there attacking it or undermining it or putting a different message. So if we were to run a long-term campaign on fairness, I don't doubt the Tories would find some way to sort of focus in on that, to find examples to undermine it. I saw something the other day which was Chakrabarti, and it had the sort of we want to abolish all public school, all private schools, and it says as soon as my son's finished his education, sort of thing. So they can find the little things to undermine everything, and in reality is that the Tories, I think they've done very well with some of their advertising. They pay a lot of money for good advertising, and sometimes it is about focusing on small groups, but I think with politics it's much more, as you said with Obama, about trying to have a message which gets through to lots of different people. We can't afford to focus an advert on that group and an advert on that group and an advert on that group, and quite often they would be contradictory if we did, and that would get thrown back at us. So it's interesting that you had the thing about Biden and the sort of integrity type thing, but at the end of the day, Trump with his horrible message of make America great again and sort of stuff everyone else, it's still got massive levels of support, and this is the problem. The altruistic approach of what's nice and good, and let's you do an advert saying we're all in favour of looking after refugees, and then we'll see what the response is in terms of the advert, which rips that apart. So it's a very complex world.
No, it is. And I mean, to your very first point, I worked for an advertising agency who said part of our philosophy was there are no rules. And things evolve, and it's because you're talking to and about human beings, and culture changes and environment changes. So I absolutely agree with that. And if we were to have a scorecard of every single ad that ever was, and we looked at my 10 principles, none of them would fit it all. So I absolutely agree. And in fact, that's one of the good things about being in advertising. They're not scientific formulae. You've got to evolve, and you've got to take the target market, the category you're in, the competition you're in. And I take your point about being not in a vacuum as a political party, and the fact that you're going to be challenged by a competitor or two. It's not wholly true to say that brands are in a vacuum either. They've got competitors. They do competitive advertising. I mean, I didn't, if it came across that I thought it was easy, then let me say, I don't think it's easy. The one thing that I would say, though, is that if you choose something like a fundamental human value and try and own it, the only thing that can trip you up really is your own actions. So if you're talking about fairness, and you do something which is blatantly unfair, you'll get the cucumber thrown at you.
Yeah, right. We've got Vicky next, and then I want to go to Mike after Vicky. Vicky, your question.
Hello. Yeah, I've got, I don't know if I'll be able to share it, but when I went to a museum, if I could share my screen, I don't know whether Anne will be able to help me. In fact, it was Anne and I, we went to the museum in Salford, and I saw a fabulous, I can just get it up. Can you see it?
No.
See anything?
No.
Nothing.
Can't see it. Okay, I have to describe it then. It's a great one. It's this idea that we're all in it together, and it's got like 3 people on a ladder with on a wall with some rising water. So you got the top at the top.
All right.
The one in the middle, and the working class downtrodden is just like above the water.
Yeah.
And it's, we'll all take a step down. So we're all into, and then you've got the drowning man. And I thought that was a fabulous kind of image, which point that was a little bit wordy still. But I do absolutely agree that you need the visual impact with a message. And our overarching values in the labour movement are, equality, like in the French Revolution, equality, fraternity. I forgot the other one.
Yeah.
That memorable one. Yeah, that's the type of thing we need to. But it's with going back to Ray's point. You need to say it with conviction and mean it. And the unfortunate thing is, you can have the most successful campaign, like Get Brexit Done. It's sold on a lie, isn't it? At the end of the day, you're selling lies, you're selling emotions, you're abusing people's emotional response. Whereas we don't want to be like that. We are here honestly to change the world for a better. And if we don't do it soon, we're all going to be brown bread, aren't we? 40 hospice, that's what Mike told us at our Labour Party branch meeting last week. That's what we've got left. So, it is heartfelt, but I suppose we have to be a bit savvy, don't we? A bit more savvy how we put it across.
I mean, just going to your point and just picking things you said to get an easy answer for myself, but the Get Brexit Done and the whole Brexit campaign, which was built on lies, is the type of thing that if you could manage to do what I was suggesting, you don't get into what we call in the advertising business a pissing contest. So you don't get into, we will spend more money than you on the national health. You don't get into the Brexit, this fact that I'm going to tell you about Brexit is true. Oh no, it's not. This fact is true, because you've elevated yourself above that. Now, it's almost impossible to get out of that completely. But if you've got this as an overarching value that you stand for, a large proportion of people are going to say, I don't really understand all these facts and figures and these consequences that people are talking about, because they're contradictory anyway. But actually, I trust these people. This one body of people, I trust more than I trust those people. And whilst, I only said fairness for Labour because I'm talking to Labour Party people. But if fairness were to be a value, it would certainly sit easier with the Labour Party than it would be the Conservative Party. Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you, David. I always predicate this with a quote from one of my favourite American politicians, Eugene Debs, who said, if I was to lead you out of the wilderness, then somebody else would lead you back into it. So that's sort of a predication. But it does seem to me that what you're saying is the most anodyne the message is, the most effective it is. So for Obama, yes, we can, is a very anodyne, but a very powerful message. Mm-hmm. It's positive, but actually has no content. And I'm just intrigued by the idea of, the idea of fairness is a positive virtue. But as you said earlier, you can fall down on your own virtuosity. That's the problem.
No, it is.
Yeah.
No, guilty as charged. It's not an easy thing to do. I do think that there's room for some party to do something like this, and fairness might not be it. I've not thought long and hard enough about it, but I was looking for things which would be motivating, elevating, and also not able to be broken down by the slightest possible misdemeanor. and it's not easy. It's not easy.
Andy, it's been absolutely fantastic. Well, not only seeing you again after some time, but also listening to you on a subject which you are obviously well versed in. I think it's given us all a great deal to think about.
Good.
One of the ads I was thinking about, political ads, was I remember Ronald Reagan going on with an ad about "You ain't seen nothing yet." It rather annoyed me because I really liked Bachman-Turner Overdrive singing the song, and so with Reagan taking it and Bachman, and I just didn't know where I was with that one. Yeah. The other thing I remember is that Sue, my wife, was talking to me this morning. She said, "I bet you don't know who actually thought of the actual thing, go to work on an egg." And of course, I didn't have a clue, but that was Faye Weldon.
It was.
Faye Weldon was the novelist.
It was when Faye Weldon worked for Ogilvy and Mather in London. Faye Weldon, before she became famous for writing novels, was a copywriter at Ogilvy and Mather a few years before me in London.
Right, cool. Well, that's something, you know. I was just trying to show off then. Hope you wouldn't know. But anyway, it's been great, Andy. It's been fantastic. We can only give you a virtual clap. That's so thank you very much indeed, mate.
Thanks for inviting me. Nice to meet you all.
What we will do is that I will upload this and I'll give you the link and goodness knows what else.